Okay, here's something to think about. What if your daily digital life, all that scrolling and clicking, isn't just about convenience? What if it's actually about a new, um, really profound kind of power that's quietly shaping who you are?
Hmm.
Imagine a world where, your feelings, your thoughts, your entire existence basically becomes raw material for someone else's profit. And often you don't even realize it's happening.
That's a provocative idea, absolutely. And
Right.
honestly, one that feels incredibly relevant to how we all live right now, doesn't it?
It really, really does. So today we're doing a deep dive into what I think is an absolutely essential, groundbreaking book, Shoshana Zuboff's The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power.
Zuboff makes this really big argument that we're living through profound, honestly, unprecedented transformation of capitalism itself.
Exactly. We want to define exactly what she means by surveillance capitalism, understand how it actually operates, and maybe grapple with why she argues it poses such a significant threat.
A threat to, well, individual autonomy, to our democratic institutions, and maybe most fundamentally, to what it even means to be human.
We're going to look at its historical roots, or parallels at least, its sort of insidious mechanisms, and this crucial fight for a human future that Zuboff believes is, well, it's already underway. So let's just dive right in.
Okay. So Zuboff introduces surveillance capitalism not just as like a concept, but as a whole new economic order. She describes it as a system that basically claims human experience, everything we do, think, feel, online, offline, claims it as free raw material for these hidden commercial practices. Practices focused on abstraction, prediction, and ultimately sales.
It sounds almost parasitic when you put it like that.
Mhm.
She argues that the traditional business of, making goods and services is actually secondary now, subordinated, right, to this new global architecture that's really designed for behavioral modification. She calls it a rogue mutation of capitalism.
Which leads to these, almost unimaginable concentrations of wealth, knowledge, and power.
And the way Zuboff frames the threat is pretty intense. She compares it to industrial capitalism's impact on the natural world back in the 19th and 20th centuries.
She says this is that significant, but for human nature in this century, she even traces the origin of what she calls instrumentarian power back to it, a new kind of dominance over society that she argues fundamentally challenges market democracy.
So it's not just trying to nudge our choices anymore, it's aiming for a new collective order, one based on total certainty.
Total certainty. And she really doesn't mince words. She calls it an expropriation of critical human rights, like our basic freedoms are being seized, almost like a coup from above.
Yeah, a coup from above. That is a stark warning.
It really is. And a crucial point here, something she really emphasizes in the age of surveillance capitalism, is that this isn't just about the technology.
Right.
She makes this critical distinction. Surveillance capitalism employs many technologies, but it cannot be equated with any technology. It's not the platforms themselves or the algorithms or AI.
Those are the tools, but not the puppet masters, as she puts it.
Exactly. She calls this the technology illusion, this idea that the tools are neutral. She argues they aren't. They're driven by these underlying economic imperatives. Those economic forces are the real directors here.
Okay, so that makes sense. It's the why behind the tech.
Mhm.
So how does it actually work then, this process of extraction and prediction?
Well, the origin story she tells about behavioral surplus at Google is kind of the perfect illustration. You remember Eric Schmidt, Google's CEO, had that eureka moment.
Oh, when he realized they were basically in the auction business.
Precisely. And you had Larry Page's early vision, which was incredibly broad. Everything you've ever heard or seen or experienced will become searchable. Your whole life will be searchable.
Which sounds amazing, but also slightly terrifying.
Right. And the crucial shift, as Zuboff details it, happened when Google figured out that the behavioral data, the stuff left over from searches, initially just used to make search better, that data could be this game-changing zero-cost asset.
And
That's behavioral surplus. And this surplus, this asset, was then diverted into what she calls a highly lucrative market exchange. This, she argues, paved the way for Google's, well, de facto monopoly in search.
so the goal changed subtly, didn't it? It wasn't just about serving users anymore.
No, it became about attracting more users to get more of this behavioral surplus for this new burgeoning market.
It's not just about the information we actively give them, like search terms, but what they passively take from our experience online and offline too.
Exactly. This extraction imperative, as she calls it pushes beyond the virtual world. It wants to claim our lived experience as human natural resources. Our lives are just constantly mediated by computers now, recording details at this, unimaginable scale.
Your breakfast conversation, the street you walk down, your run in the park. My smart fridge probably knows more about my late night snacking than I'm willing to admit.
You are definitely not alone there. And this imperative, it's always pushing for new supply routes into real life. Think about Google's Street View.
Oh yeah, the controversy when it first came out, collecting Wi-Fi data.
Right. But Zuboff argues Google's relentless pursuit wasn't just about maps. It was about expanding digital dispossession from the virtual world to the one that we call real. And that led to tools like Cartographer for mapping building interiors, even indoor positioning systems.
And it's not just Google, obviously. Smart homes, the whole Internet of Things.
Yeah.
They're huge players.
Absolutely. Take something like the sleep number bed she mentions. It collects biometric and sleep-related data, your movement, breathing, heart rate, even audio signals from your bedroom.
And the privacy policies are usually impossible to understand.
Dense, opaque, yeah. Often designed, she points out, to let them keep using the data even after you deactivate your account. And smart TVs, like Samsung Smart Things, they become these central hubs for a whole ecosystem of connected devices, just doubling down on rendering our private lives into data.
It even gets into kids' toys, right?
She discusses examples of popular toys bundled with apps that capture and upload children's conversations, accessing phone functions totally irrelevant to the toy, even asking kids for personal info like where they live. It's unsettling.
It really is. So how did they get away with all this without, constant massive public backlash?
That's a critical point Zuboff makes in the book. She talks about the use of euphemisms, terms like digital exhaust or digital breadcrumbs.
Right, makes it sound harmless, like leftovers.
Exactly. It subtly camouflages what is essentially, she argues, a rights grab. It makes this vast appropriation sound like, oh, just recycling waste, rather than taking something valuable like booty or contraband.
Okay, so they extract this behavioral surplus. What's the end game? What do they do with it?
That brings us to the second part, the prediction imperative, using all this data to predict our futures. But crucially, for others' gain, not ours.
Right. Not to help me predict my future, but for someone else to predict and maybe influence mine.
Precisely. Hal Varian, Google's chief economist for a long time, he talked about new uses for computer mediation that became even more important than just extracting data. Things like new contractual forms due to better monitoring, personalization, customization, and continuous experiments. Think about car insurers. They openly say they want to be like Google, seeing the telematics data from our driving as a new profit source. It shows this profound shift. Zuboff says surveillance capitalists have shifted from using automated machine processes to know about your behavior to using machine processes to shape your behavior according to their interests. From automating information flows about you to automating you.
From automating information about us to automating us. That's a truly chilling thought.
It connects to what Zuboff calls the uncontract. It's not like a normal agreement between two parties. No dialogue. It's unilateral. It replaces promises and mutual understanding with automated procedures for promises. It essentially bypasses our human agency to create these more lucrative prediction products that approximate observation and therefore guarantee outcomes.
That really shifts the whole dynamic of power and control, doesn't it?
Fundamentally, and Zuboff identifies this pattern, this method they use to manage public resistance and keep expanding their reach. She calls it the Dispossession Cycle. It has 4 stages. Stage 1 is incursion. This is the audacious claim to new ground. Think early Google scanning Gmail content for ads, or Street View grabbing that Wi-Fi data. There's often an initial shock, maybe some pushback.
Right. People notice something new and maybe don't like it immediately.
Exactly. But then comes stage 2, habituation. This is about normalization, social acceptance. Facebook's like button is her classic example here. While they were publicly denying tracking users across the web, they quietly institutionalized the like button. It became this indispensable prosthetic of virtual communication. We just got used to it being everywhere.
Okay, so we adapt. Then what's stage 3?
Stage 3 is adaptation. This involves making sort of superficial tactical changes, enough to satisfy regulators or calm down the public, but without changing the core operation.
Like Facebook's FTC settlement.
That's a good example. It required a privacy program, sure, but only after 1.5 years of habituation had already locked the practice in place.
Okay, so incursion, habituation, adaptation. What's the last one?
Stage 4 is redirection. This is where they cultivate new rhetoric, new methods, maybe pivot the technology slightly to make the contested operation seem compliant, while the core extraction imperative just keeps going.
Like Google Glass.
Mm.
Huge privacy backlash as a consumer product.
So they pivoted to enterprise use. Same tech, same data collection potential, just less public scrutiny. The core business model, she argues, rarely actually changes through this cycle.
Oh, it's easy to jump to comparing this to, like, Orwell's Big Brother or historical totalitarianism. Zuboff actually argues that comparison is unhelpful,
She says it impedes our understanding. She calls it the horseless carriage syndrome.
meaning we see new dangers only through old lenses.
Exactly. Which can lead to incorrect conclusions. She draws a sharp distinction. Totalitarianism, think Stalinism. Nazism aimed for total possession of the state, the reformation of souls through terror, violence, soul engineering.
Brutal physical control.
The power wielded by surveillance capitalism is different. It's about transforming the market into a project of total certainty. It doesn't necessarily want our bodies or souls for some grotesque regime of pain.
It just wants guaranteed outcomes.
It effectively exiles us from our own behavior, she says, to ensure those guaranteed outcomes for its markets.
And the intellectual roots are fascinating, too. She connects it back to B.F. Skinner.
Radical behaviorism. Skinner's ideas about conditioning, reinforcement, shaping precise behavioral routines. He genuinely believed his science could, save civilization by managing behavior, extrapolating from pigeons and rats to human society.
So it's not about crude force. It's about sophisticated behavioral tuning.
That's the idea. And this leads to another really critical concept she develops, the hijack division of learning.
Based on Durkheim's division of labor.
Durkheim argued the division of labor fundamentally shapes society. Zuboff argues surveillance capitalism does something similar, but it corrupts the division of learning. It means surveillance capital accumulates the power to supply all the answers to the most essential questions.
So they become the sole arbiters of knowledge about us.
Pretty much. It commands the material infrastructure and expert brain power to dominate this division of learning. This creates, she says, unprecedented asymmetries of knowledge and power.
And the result for us?
A kind of false consciousness stemming from these hidden facts of automated engineered behavior modification. We simply don't know what we don't know about how our behavior is being shaped.
Which must have profound human costs. She talks about society being reimagined as a hive.
To be monitored and tuned for guaranteed outcomes.
And the psychological consequences of life in this hive? Well, there's growing evidence about the toll.
Especially for younger people on social media.
Yes, particularly young Facebook users in the studies she cites. Research consistently shows that the main psychological process on platforms like Facebook is social comparison. We're just constantly measuring ourselves against others. And that doesn't usually end well, does it?
No. Studies show that exposure to, say, beautiful users or profiles suggesting high career success leads directly to negative self-image, envy, and lower life satisfaction. One study found over 20% of reported envy experiences were triggered by Facebook.
She argues the platforms are designed for this.
Scientifically engineered, she says, into a continuous spiral of escalating fusion, potentially fulfilling criteria for an addictive state. That inherent human drive for self-construction, figuring out who we are,
Gets replaced by seeking external validation.
seeking cues, likes, validation from the hive. It creates this feedback loop of ego gratification and inevitably ego injury. And fundamentally, this system assaults our self-awareness. It tears down our capacity to regulate our thoughts, emotions, and desires.
So the very things we need to resist persuasion.
Which brings us to that passenger pigeon analogy she uses. It's quite vivid.
Right, their social instinct made them vulnerable.
Their social sense was so strong, she writes, it made them easy targets for hunters using store pigeons. Their adaptations seeking the crowd for safety, for home, became their downfall.
And the parallel is?
That our own natural empathy, our need for social connection, is being exploited in the digital hive, potentially leading, she warns starkly, to the extinction of ourselves.
This erosion extends even to our physical spaces. She talks about the loss of sanctuary.
Yeah, the abrogation of sanctuary, that most ancient citadel, she calls it, the idea of an inviolable space. In the vision of the big other, as she terms the surveillance apparatus, our walls aren't boundaries anymore.
They're just coordinates.
Coordinates for smart thermostats, cameras, speakers, light switches, all designed to extract and render our experience in order to actuate our behavior. Every space, every moment, potentially rendered, analyzed, monetized.
And connecting this back to our sense of agency. It affects our future.
Profoundly. She argues it impacts our right to the future tense. Human will, she says, is the mental organ of our future. It lets us imagine possibilities, summon our futures into existence, make plans, take contingent actions.
But surveillance capitalism interferes with that.
Through its economies of action, it ensures that the path is already shaped by surveillance capitalism's economic imperatives. The locus of control shifts. It's no longer I will.
It becomes you will.
Exactly. And in this scenario, decision rights and self-determination become privileges of the wealthy, those who can afford to opt out or shield themselves from the constant rendering.
The bleak picture. So the big question she tackles is, how on earth did they get away with it?
Right. Several key factors converged.
Like the post-9/11 environment.
Definitely. The war against terror, this societal compulsion for certainty, created a really permissive climate for government surveillance and massive data collection. Programs like Total Information Awareness, those reports of intelligence agencies going on secret shopping sprees in Silicon Valley.
That certainly lowered the barriers.
Absolutely. Then there's the huge influence of neoliberal ideology. Surveillance capitalism thrived, Zuboff argues, partly because democracy itself was already on the ropes.
How so?
Neoliberalism championed market freedom above all else, often hollowing out democratic institutions and accountability, while contributing to massive wealth inequality. Surveillance capitalism found shelter under that umbrella.
And what about the internet's early ideals? Freedom of speech.
That played a role too, ironically. It talks about free speech fundamentalism. The genuine belief in the internet as this emancipatory force for expression actually helped deflect careful scrutiny from the new market form that was emerging.
So the focus on content moderation, for example, distracted from the underlying economic model of extraction.
That's part of her argument. The Constitution's free speech protections were sometimes exploited, she suggests, to shield practices that were fundamentally anti-democratic. Surveys consistently show people say they value privacy, but there's a huge gap in understanding how data is gathered, what's done with it, the sheer scale of it all. And as she stresses, individuals alone can't possibly fight this. The burden is too great against these massive corporations.
So if individual action isn't enough, what's the alternative? How do we fight back?
Well, she draws another fascinating historical parallel here to Karl Polanyi's idea of the double movement.
Okay, explain that.
Polanyi argued that industrial capitalism, left unchecked, was so disruptive that society inevitably pushed back to protect itself. It had to tether the capitalist project to the social. Think about the progressive era, trust busting, the New Deal, labor laws, civil rights, environmental regulations.
Society reacting to embed the market in social values.
Exactly. And Zuboff calls for a similar societal response now, a synthetic declaration for a third modernity to counter surveillance capitalism.
And are we seeing signs of that pushback, like GDPR in Europe?
GDPR and the right to be forgotten are definitely examples. But Zuboff cautions that the real impact will depend upon how European societies interpret the new regulatory regime in legislation and in the courts. Enforcement and interpretation are another. And again, individual rights requests are insufficient against these staggering asymmetries of knowledge and power.
So it requires something bigger, collective action.
Yes. She asks how today's users, a term she dislikes, preferring people, can mobilize in new ways that reflect our unique 21st century conditions of existence. There's an absolute need, she argues, for new social movements.
And are there grassroots signs of resistance happening already?
There are. She points to this emerging art of hiding, a new generation of activists, artists, inventors dedicating their genius, as she puts it, to the prospects of human invisibility.
Like what kind of things?
Things like signal-blocking phone cases, prosthetic fingerprints to fool scanners, LED visors to block facial recognition, special coats designed to block tracking signals, apps that try to introduce randomness into your routines to disrupt prediction. She sees these not just as gadgets, but as organized artistic interventions, signs of people trying to reclaim their autonomy.
So wrapping this up, Zuboff's warning is incredibly stark, isn't it?
It really is. To quote her directly from the Age of Surveillance Capitalism, if industrial civilization flourished at the expense of nature and now threatens to cost us the earth, an information civilization shaped by surveillance capitalism will thrive at the expense of human nature and threatens to cost us our humanity.
Wow. Cost us our humanity. That really leaves you thinking. This dive into Age of Surveillance Capitalism just throws these urgent questions right at us, doesn't it? What kind of future do we actually want to declare? How do we reclaim that right to the future? Reassert the value of sanctuary in a world that feels increasingly monitored and measured.
Yeah, it forces you to confront that this isn't just about, targeted ads or data privacy settings.
No, it's about the fundamental shape of our human lives, our autonomy, our societies, and ultimately who gets to decide what that future looks like. A lot to think about.